David Cleandon.
Speaker, kia ora koutou. Mr Speaker, the point's been made already that habeas corpus is one of those fundamental precepts of our constitutional system, of our rule of law. The Greens will be content to support this amendment to the core Act legislation. It's interesting that the 2001 Act in itself derived from a 1997 Law Commission report, which at that time saw fit to look at the existing situation, then found that it was not as good as it could be and sought to make it better. Of course, in 2007, some 10 or so years ago, the then Minister invited the Law Commission to once again have a look at the operation of this legislation, and the result, of course, is the proposed amendment that we're debating or beginning to debate tonight. I think it's worth noting that that's an entirely appropriate process, and it is useful to have that substantial piece of work already done, which should ease the task of the Select Committee. I would have to echo Mr Cheval's comments about the appropriateness of how this is coming to the House, however. We know that, of course, every member of this House has every right to put a bill into the ballot, and every day the ballot is drawn, there's an intake of breath, as we hope will be the lucky ones. I was interested to read McGee, and of course that reinforces the point. Any member may put in a private member's bill. But the language of McGee, the inference is clear. The expectation is that this is something, a tool, a mechanism that government will use lightly. The question must be asked, why is this fairly pragmatic technical amendment to an existing bill, to an existing act, not been included into some form of omnibus bill, included into another justice bill? It is a peculiar tactic, and it's interesting that a particular journalist some weeks ago was moved to speculate on perhaps the motivation behind these members' bills we're seeing from the government that are popping up. And I do think Mr Cheval might have transversed that territory very well and come to the right conclusion. So the principle behind habeas corpus in this particular bill clearly it's not put at any risk. I'm interested to hear Mr Little's remarks, but generally speaking, the notion of habeas corpus, the right of a person to be brought before their accusers, to be able to speak in defence of their actions or whatever it might be, is fairly well protected. We ought never to take it for granted. We have seen the ongoing indefensible abuse of the principle of habeas corpus in the United States over many years. The ongoing stain on the American reputation, that is Guantanamo Bay, the detention without trial, without access to legal information, in some cases without even being properly identified. One hopes we never see such a stain on New Zealand's reputation, but I think it is an apt reminder that we ought never to take these things for granted, to continue to value these fundamentals of our legal system, and to be thoughtful about any amendments, any changes we make to them. As I say, I'm sure this bill is coming from a very sound and a very straightforward foundation. I did note initially with a minor concern that there's a clause in this bill that enables the use of technology, of audiovisual technology. And I'm a person, I must say, who immediately hears a wee alarm bell going when we introduce technology into the practice and the execution of justice. In this instance, however, it is clearly at the end that the judge may initiate the use of an audio-video link, for example, but I do note that the judge must be convinced that it is in the interests of justice before he or she determines the use of such a technology. And I think that's an interesting test, and it's perhaps a useful conversation for the Select Committee to have, just to think through exactly what that would mean in the real world in the application of this bill. So with those few comments, I do reiterate the Greens will be supporting this bill. We have our suspicions and questions about the mechanism used to bring it into the House, but that won't prevent us from supporting what we see as a useful piece of legislation. Thank you.
Dennis O'Rourke.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. The right to apply for a writ of habeas corpus